Wow, you all turned out. I'm so pleased that people standing. Al told me that I had 12 to 15 minutes, and I thought about what my wife said once. Said, Joe, a preacher can't tell you how to get across the street in less than 5 minutes. But I'm honored to be a part of this class these 24 years, and I have felt like I've always tried to quit while I was winning. And Tommy Ward wrote me a letter after my last appearance telling me how fine I did. And he said, when you dropped the Bible under the pulpit, you went down and kept on talking while you were down there. So I didn't bring a Bible today, but I brought Scripture in my heart. And I feel like a presentation like this can be immortal without being eternal. And so I will be brief today. In my previous pastorate in Louisville, I was going in Qusair Children's Hospital, and one entrance was a revolving door. I was the only one going in and only one person coming out. And I happened to recognize him, and he me. He's not a member of my church, but a doctor. And we were in the same civic club at the time. As he passed me by, he shouted, "Hey, preacher, what do you know for sure?" Now, if he had held me to that, I can't imagine what I would have said to him. But if he should ask me that this morning, I could tell him exactly what I know for sure. I would lay these thoughts at the doorsteps of your mind for you to think about, and hopefully they'll be helpful. One thing I know for sure is that life is short. It's very brief compared to life that has been on this planet. And we are just passing through. We're just guests here. We sing, "This is my Father's world." We don't believe that. We believe it's our world, but it's not. It is His. And the 90th psalmist understood that. He said, evidently he grasped it, that God wasn't involved in time. He said, "For 1,000 years in thy sight is but as yesterday when it is past." But when he talks about life, he says life is like a sleep. Now think about that for a moment. It's 10 o'clock and you go to sleep, and you sleep for hopefully 5 or 6 hours, 7 or 8. And that much of your life is gone. That you were out of it completely and it's passed you by, because life is short. He said life is like a song. It's like a tale that is told. Well, now, you know that's true, that life is like that. You sit down to Masterpiece Theater and watch the Downton Abbey, and an hour and a half passes. Good grief. Well, that's the way it happens in our lives. We realize that life really is short. First summer here, we took our children, flew them out west, and rented a car and tried to see the Hoover Dam and all those things. When we got to the Grand Canyon, I had no idea what was in store for me. There is nothing else like it in the world. You peek over the rim and look down, and it's a mile down there, 5,280 feet. And archaeologists tell us that each foot represents 1,000 years. See what we're talking about here? It's 5,280,000,000 years that's been there. I say to you, life is short. Now, the second thing I know for sure is that death is certain. And if you don't feel like thinking about it, you haven't faced the reality that you're going to die. My dear friend, my predecessor here, Jack Redhead, moved out to Wellspring, and he announced, "Wellspring is God's waiting room." Now that's clever, but let me tell you something. The whole world is God's waiting room. It just so happens that at Wellspring, some of us are nearer to the end than others. But it is God's waiting room. The world is. And so, let's see, where am I on there? I didn't write a manuscript this time. I've just got it all memorized. I think maybe that concludes that point. that life is short and death is certain, and we need to recognize that we are going to die. I had what I call an epiphany regarding that when I was 36 years old. It was on September the 17th, 1961, in Louisville, Kentucky. I sat down for breakfast and I opened the Courier Journal, and there the headline on the paper was that Dag Hammarskjöld, the General Secretary of the United Nations, was killed in a plane accident along with all of his attachés over the Democratic Republic of Congo. He was on his way for a peace mission to South Africa. When you read it, it wasn't exactly an obituary, but it came down to the end, and the last sentence on that paper said this: Mr. Hammarskjöld always carried in his attaché case a copy of the book, The Imitation of Christ, by Thomas à Kempis. When it swept over me, I owned that book. I bought it at Montreat sometime before. I'd never opened it, never read it. I knew who Thomas Aquinas was. He's a German monk during the 16th century, and he wrote and evidently got other monks to write and put out this book, The Imitation of Christ. I couldn't wait to get to my study that morning to see what that thing said. I closed the door, took the book off the shelf, probably blew the dust off of it, and I sit down in my favorite chair and I opened it. And it opened to page 64, 65. And across the top of the page it gave what the chapter was. It was called Meditations on Death. And these are the first words I read. When it is morning, think thou wilt not come to eventide. And when evening is coming, dare not to promise thyself the morning. Always therefore, be thou ready, and so live that death may never take thee unprepared. Well, I closed the book and prayed, and I decided to open it again, and it opened to page 64, 65, just what I had read. I closed it and opened it again, and it opened to 64. Well, I don't play games with myself. I laid the book aside, but I was getting a message. Now, it doesn't mean that you get up in the morning and say, Lord, is it today? Am I going to get it today? It's not like that. But it's an awareness that you're just passing through, and that you belong to God, and that you are going to die sometime. If you feel that every day, one day you'll be in rock, Think about that. That's supposed to be humorous. But if you think you're going to die that day and don't, one day you will, okay? You'll be right. All right. So get with it on this in what should you do today? What should you think about today? What should you be today if this were the last day of your life? There's nothing weird about that. That is the second thing I know for sure. Death is certain. Now the third thing I know for sure, and the final thing, Presbyterian ministers always have 3 points. The final one is God keeps his promises. Now we'll look just at 2, and the quotes that I give you, you could say them with me, but they reveal 2 of God's promises. In Matthew 11, 28 and 29, Jesus said, "Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn of me, for I am gentle and lowly of heart, and you will find rest for your souls. My yoke is easy, and my burden is light." Now that's from God. What God is saying to you, he has been in your soul before you were ever born. And he has always been with you and wanting you to love him. You can't make anybody love you, so he's never tried it that way. But he is there. And no matter what you have done or thought or said, he will forgive you and take you today, whatever your burden is, and carry it with you. Now, Jesus never promised that you wouldn't suffer. He didn't promise that you'd never be disappointed or bereaved. But his promise is, whatever happens to you, he's with you. That's one promise. Now, the second promise is in John 14, verses 1 and 2. Let not your heart be troubled, Jesus said on that last night of his earthly life. Believe in God. Believe also in me. In my Father's house are many rooms. If it were not so, would I have told you that I go to prepare a place for you? And when I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and take you unto myself, so that where I am, there you will be also. In other words, not only is he going with you all of your life, but he's going to take you to himself when you die. That's why that is important. Why I'm sure that it's true. Hey, preacher, what do you know? For sure, I know that life is short, death is certain, and God keeps his promises.